But you still have these grays that are popping out.
Correct. So the grays are, and you'll notice the grays are on the base. Again, I don't want to make it advantageous for people with no skill to start chewing up nodes because they know that it could very rarely produce something. If it's there at all, they're going to go for it. So it's best to just say, hey, if you want to actually get into the colored materials, you need to have skill in these things.
You mentioned earlier that you can set nodes to the point where if you don't have that skill or that tool, you just can't even dent the node.
We're doing that based on the
tool,
on the tier of the node.
Oh, okay.
Right. So gold, if you don't have a gold tool,
okay,
you're just not going to damage. I can show you that.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering whether something similar here, because I do think you're right. I think somebody who doesn't have a lot of, somebody who just has the base skill, I think they are likely to just wander around and keep whacking on every node they can, because why not?
And that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
And if that does become a problem, it's really simple to just come in here to the base tables and just drop that to nothing or minuscule. The goal is to not incentivize people who have no skill to harvest. Now, as I already explained to you in the skill system,
is there...
Oh.
So over the entire thing, once the game is mature, what is the overall distribution spread for the low-level resources versus the high-level ones? Because the way the system is set up, you pretty much always want to push towards the high-end stuff, right?
If it's obtainable in your world band. Right. A lot of it is based on your world band and being able to find it. Right. Or who controls those areas.
Right.
Right. So
I guess I'm wondering about a surplus problem on the low end stuff.
I'm hoping that we don't have that problem because everything is used for the alloy system to feed. Copper is always useful. Tin is always useful because you combine it with gold to make rose gold in the example of copper. So it's always useful. And even then, you're going to be making enough essentially junk things or pouring it into walls and other things in your bases that there's always a purpose for the...
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. There's always there's a reason why an advanced user still wants piles of copper.
Yes. And that's always been the goal, is because there's lots of it out there and you're going to want to use it.
Yeah.
We don't want you just throwing it away. Even though if you have a bunch of purple and a bunch of white, you're obviously going to throw away the white. Right, I mean, inventory space.
There's an ongoing need for it. Well, if you're limited, yes. But if there's an ongoing need for the white, you're still going to occasionally use it, right?
Yes.
Like, it might be better for dumping in the wall while you want to save the purple for...
Exactly. So what I think is going to happen is the POIs, which produce big, giant stuff just in a chest that anybody can go grab, that stuff is going to be of the white and gray quality. And you're going to use that for putting into the walls, putting into buildings, putting into building the base. Yeah. Because it's going to come in such a large quantity that this stuff is going to be more specialized and used for the crafting system. You're going to want to use the quality levels available.
Finding ways to make it so that there's always the demand for the lower end stuff, that some of those lower end recipes are really needed for the higher end and all of that kind of thing.
Well, again, that didn't, on Galaxies, that was a goal too, right? It never ended up working that way.
Yeah, but a lot of the big reason was that because you could basically, I think of it as vertically integrate, if you could be your own supplier the whole time, then it didn't really matter, right?
Right.
And the thing that we didn't do was say that as you go up, you can't make the lower end stuff anymore.
Correct.
Right? That would have made it so, I always do now I need somebody else. I want to go make the awesome thing, but to make the awesome thing, somebody else has to make me the other parts.
Well, again, that's not a lot of fun for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right? You're the master crafter and you forgot how to make the basic stuff. For lore reasons, it doesn't work. For gameplay, it doesn't work in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right?
It's very... it feels punitive, basically.
Absolutely. So how can we make the recipes was, in my mind was, how can we make them useful to everyone all the time, right? And those low end, there really isn't low end materials in the way that we think of it, right? It's because of the alloy stuff. Everyone's going to always want,
as long as you can put them into the alloys, right?
Right, because then everybody always wants copper and tin, right? Because it mixes with gold in a way that produces an interesting stat that people want in their end item, right? Or again, the goal with the recipes is that they just take metal, and you can put whatever type of metal you want in there, and it combines in whatever way we want to stat-wise to make the interesting stuff. So the more powerful stats, you can be pretty sure they're going to require copper, right? Critical hit chance is going to require some type of copper and tin and gold, and that should keep it so that they're always used, right? So that's been a goal all along.
All right. Well, devil in the details on that one.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely, once we start building the recipes, that will come along. But the goal here was to just make this as fun as it could be,
right? From
that RPG number aspect that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, which is still, I think, probably the biggest thing that I'm wondering about, right? Is so like even what you just described with the crafting stuff, there's there's that strategic mix of, well, I'm going to throw more of this in and less of this other, partly because I can obtain this. I can get this in limited quantities. I've got a contact, whatever, so I can buy this. So therefore, this is the landscape, and now I have some trade-offs where I can make. I'm going to go for this alloy and bump up this stat, right? There's kind of like some strategic thinking to it. The harvesting is just more linear. There's not a lot of the strategic thinking at the moment to moment. And
well, again, is it made for somebody is it made for a different style of gamer, right? So if we look back to Galaxy's days, a lot of times the crafters didn't want to go do the harvesting, because it took so much time to run their factories and set up their shops, but they just didn't find the survey game and the laying down of the harvesters and maintaining those harvesters a fun game to play.
Sure.
But there was a certain type of person who did. And that was the rise of the harvester gameplay style.
Yeah.
Right? They would just go gather their stuff.
But there was more of an exploration. So there's an exploration quality there. There was a bit of a hot-cold game. And there was kind of an economic thing going on, right? Where there was some cost to the... cost to setting up the harvesters. Harvesters were crafted items, so they came in very.
Unfortunately, they didn't have. Once you had it, it was right. Yeah. Once you had 10 big harvesters, you didn't need them ever again.
Right, you kind of capped out.
Right.
But that's actually what I'm thinking here too. Is that you're kind of going to cap out here. Right. You're going to just eventually work your way to that nicest tool, and you're not going to have. I guess kind of a strategic sort of.
Well, the tools will go away, right? They have decay,
they have decay. They'll,
right.
Sure.
So you're going to need a supply of tools, and hopefully, the goal with the group stuff is that you're going to go want to find someone who has a skill in the group skills, or even if they don't have it, you might have it, and I'm like, hey, to activate my group skill, I need to have at least one other person because otherwise, I'm not in a group around me out harvesting, right? So it's more of a team thing, which does have its own risks, right?
Yeah, but there's no team coordination involved. Everybody's just doing the one thing.
Sure.
And ironically, and this is kind of funny, what occurred to me is, so that's fine. It actually makes it into a kind of a social activity because you don't have to accept that we're requiring you to hold down a key, so you can't actually chat while you're doing it.
Oh, you mean when you're actually doing the input?
Yeah.
Right, you'd have to do it in between nodes.
In between nodes, yeah. Which is in between nodes, you're probably running somewhere.
Assuming people are on some type of voice chat, which
is increasingly more common.
Right.
Yeah, but that's an interesting thing. I mean, if... when would you ever want to stop early? There isn't any reason to.
On a node?
Yeah.
Yeah, there isn't a reason. The reason you have now is just we want to blow this up as fast as possible. Right.
Yeah.
You would stop early if you ran out of stamina and you were forced to...
But that'll force a stop.
Correct.
So it doesn't matter. So you could actually take away the requirement to hold down the key.
You just tap it once and it just goes?
Yeah. And the reason I suggest that is because, again, I'm looking... I'm looking for something that makes because I agree with you. It's a play style, right? And so I'm looking for something that takes harvesting away from just a straight linear kind of thing, and actually saying, in a weird way, this is actually the group hangout activity, right? Is perfectly valid to my mind, but then you have to actually enable them to chat while they're doing it, right? Which is why I make that suggestion, because that's a really tiny change. I don't know how consistent it is with everything else, but it's pretty small. And then all of a sudden, you're working on a node, but you can all be chatting away while you're all doing it. So yeah, just an idea.
Now, spawning bad guys, bandits coming. Right.
Yeah,
then you have to have guards with you.
Right. And the thing about that works great for team kind of stuff, but it doesn't play so well into, hey, the harvester's play style is this.
Correct.
Right. And so
right, his goal is to get as much stuff as possible, the amount of time he has, put it on his pack animal, and get that safely back to town.
Exactly.
Right. That is his number one goal.
Right. It's still. I often think of this in terms of like fulfilling the fantasy of the world, right? And so when I think of, okay, here's a miner or somebody, and this is what their RPG fantasy is. Sure, they want to continue to get better at it, but also, how do they feel smart? How do they feel like, wow, I'm really good at doing this? The raw incrementing of numbers is one thing, but if there were things like, all right, I've started tapping on this too fast, it's going to shatter on me.
Right.
Right. Well, let me cool down, that kind of thing. Then there's something where it's like, well, I'm affecting the result in some way through the way I played.
The question is, I think fundamentally, is do we think that this role needs some type of minigame as they're harvesting?
Right.
Right. I mean, and that's the basis. We went safely with no. They just pressed the button and they played the RPG game and they won, and it's more of a slot machine, right? They got lucky and
it's pretty much, it's as set up right now. It's pretty much a slot machine that somebody who pursues this is just rigging the slot machine in their favor, and if you pursue it, it's purely just time expenditure.
But you definitely feel progression. So you
are sure you're going to feel like you're advancing.
Like you're going to feel that you're getting better at mining because it's going to get quicker. You're going to see better stuff coming out. Which again, is that what people who play this want to feel? Right? I spent an hour tonight and I came out with X amount of greens and X amount of blues and a bunch of this stuff. And then a week later, as they've got more skills, it's like, wow, I'm starting to bring back a whole lot more stuff. Right? And that just happens over time until they hit the point where they don't progress any further. Right.
Yeah.
Or in this case, they do it for one material type, right? Because when we looked at the skill trees, you saw how long it took to max a particular skill type.
It's quite a while.
Material type. Right. So I'm really good with copper, but I'm not so good with iron, and I'm not so good with gold. Right. But over time, and in this case, we're looking at it over a year, right? Then they're good with all the material types, and they can just go out and get whatever is needed. Yeah. In the beginning, it's going to be, hey, who's good at copper? Hey, who's good at gold? Who's good at tin? And we will specialize. And that might even be based on how the terrains get built, the areas we go to. If gold is more predominant in this types of areas, that may be where we're going tonight.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, it is a play style that doesn't necessarily want tons of incredibly active decision making, right? The part that becomes the game is actually how do I coordinate? How do we schedule this? I have to maintain relationships. I have to, and that's an interesting, complex game, right? And that's fine. But if that is what we choose as the game, as the thing that makes it interesting,
sure,
then it does suggest things like, oh, well, in that case, while you're out there doing this, it should be a social relationship-driven kind of thing, which suggests the chat.
Sure.
And then we run into the...
it is very similar to, if you look at EVE, they call them the mining ops, right? And they all gather up and they go out there as a group. But they're mainly, you hear them on voice chat, and they're talking to each other, and they're having chit-chat while they're blowing up rocks.
Exactly.
They're smashing rocks as a team.
They're smashing rocks, but the chat facility is pretty straightforward.
But it's also a thing that we do on Wednesday.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, it's a social...
And in the meantime, if I go out on Monday and Tuesday, I'm going out by myself with my pack animal. It's way more risky, right? I might get whacked while I'm out there because there's going to be other players, right? That's always the constant fear too, is who's around that corner.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but we go out as a big team and we just churn stuff in. We have people loading the animals. People are running the animals back between town and us. There's a whole layer of stuff going on once we have a group out there that doesn't exist for the solo player.
Cool.
Cool.
All right, let's see if all these, whatever it is, tacos or barbecue or whatever is all gone there now.